Hi, my name is Alexey Archipenko. Today I'm starting the new theoretical video course about the music software. I will try to structure the information about different applications that are currently out there on the market, including digital audio workstations, note editors, effects, synthesizers, samplers, and so on. I will compare and review some of the applications to help you choose correct applications for your tasks. And also I will talk about how these applications interact and how I usually use them. Okay, now let's start with the general workflow of an orchestral music piece. I choose orchestral music because it is usually the most demanding in terms of the number of applications used, and it usually needs, for example, a note editor and so on. So the longest way will be to start with a paper, with a score on the paper. Today, music notation software mostly replace the need for use of paper scores. But many composers are used to it, and I think it is generally the matter of taste, matter of habit to use the paper or not. So first of all, the score on the paper is created, then it is usually imported into music notation software. And in this software, the music usually lives, of course, in the form of some internal format, but it can be exported in the format of PDF, visual, and also like MIDI. Now the music notation software allows to create the score from the scratch, to analyze it, to use some automatic arrangement techniques, some algorithms, to see all different instruments at the same time and to see how they interact. And even it allows you to audition a piece using some very simple sound library that is usually included into any music notation software. And as the years go by, the sound of these internal sound libraries is becoming better and better, and today the best music notation software like Finale or Sibelius, they include very good libraries that sound good enough for some demos. But of course, if you need better sound quality, you usually use some additional libraries and additional applications to create a better sound. The most common way to do it is to export music from music notation software into the digital audio workstation. Here you will have MIDI and audio. So you usually take MIDI or open MIDI format from the music notation software, export it, and then import it into digital audio workstation. Now you can use different tools of the audio workstation to move the notes a little bit, to change different parameters like continuous controls, dynamics, vibrato, and so on, that your music library allows to change. And at last you mix all the instruments that are used in your piece and you create an audio mix. And from this point there starts the mastering process. The mastering process is the process when you adapt your track so that it sounds good on any speaker, or at least it sounds on a speaker. Okay. It can sound on some mono speakers, also that it has some tone balance that is more common for your style and for your type of piece, and also that its dynamic is appropriate for your style, and some other things. So this is the final adjustment of the audio mix that you create with a digital audio workstation, and usually this mastering process is done in some external application. It can be some different digital audio workstation, or it can be, for example, an audio editor. So I will put an audio editor here, and as a result of audio editor you get the audio master. Okay, now talking about the people who are involved in this process. The first, of course, is composer. Here, usually a copyist and digital audio workstation is usually the place where a lot of people meet. But the most important person who takes part in the work in digital audio workstation is usually a composer. Because when you sequence the instruments in digital audio workstation, you usually not only just set up the sound, but you usually also set up the articulations, the techniques that are used by musicians. And this is why a musician is also sometimes needed on this phase. But of course, if you can get musician, the best way is just to record him. For example, if there is not large section of the instruments that are used in your piece. And also on this step you can need an audio engineer or sound engineer. The final mastering process is usually done by sound engineer. So why do we need sound engineer on the stage of digital audio workstation? This is because when you create an audio mix, you usually need to know something about mastering. So if you just create the mix without thinking about that you will need to create master later, then it will be very difficult to create master from your track. And maybe you will need to redo some steps of mixing here. So this is the cause why we usually need sound engineer on this stage. Okay, now is the music notation software the only source for the information, for the notes that come into the digital audio workstation? Of course not. You can also record some instruments. So this will be audio recording. So this audio recording can be done in some different studio, on some different audio workstation, or it can be done on the same audio workstation. Then it will be just the part of the functions of this audio workstation. The other way to get the notes inside the digital audio workstation, to get the sound or the audio here, is to use some algorithmic composition systems. This is not very useful, but this works the way that you set up this audio, this music composition system, and it creates the score for you, usually in MIDI format. So here will be music composing algorithms. And of course also you can just play the music into the digital audio workstation using some for example, MIDI interface, MIDI keyboard, MIDI controllers, and then you will not need any of the other process. Okay, now of course not all of the steps are needed every time you create a music composition. Frankly speaking, each of the steps can be skipped. For example, many composers work in music notation software without the score. Also, you can not use music notation software and just use some music composing algorithms, or just improvise and record audio, or record MIDI notes into the digital audio workstation. Then you will need only the digital audio workstation. And sometimes you can do the mastering into your digital audio workstation without just coming anywhere from it. So the most concentrated way to create music is just to work inside the digital audio workstation, and this can lead to very good quality sound. But of course this depends. So okay, what are the other different workflows? For example, music notation software, digital audio workstation. This is a simplified workflow, but yet it has all the things. It has the score and it has the sound. Also there can be just the digital audio workstation, and also there can be no digital audio workstation. There can be just the music notation software and then some audio editing application, because usually music notation software does not allow, or maybe it is not so convenient in music notation software to edit the music, to master it, to control dynamics, equalize, and so on. But in general, for example, Sibelius allows to load the VST instruments, samplers, synthesizers, any effects that you want here, and the only drawback is that it is not that convenient to work with them. So okay, you have mixer, but you cannot do some things with it. The routing is limited, and when you use some samplers and synthesizers, you cannot just move the notes visually. You cannot extend them or decrease the length, or for example you cannot draw the continuous controls, control the dynamics and the vibrato, but of course you can input the continuous controls. You can change the note length using the dialog boxes, but it is not that convenient like in digital audio workstation, and for large piece it can be time consuming, and also you will not see what you get, so you just hear, but you will not see exactly what you are doing. You just will see some numbers. So of course this is an interesting way because it is economic, and you do not need an audio workstation. But on the other hand, there are audio workstations that are very cheap today, and you can use them. For example, Reaper and so on. So these are the different variants of the workflow. And so now the question is, how do you choose the variant that is just for you? So choosing the workflow usually depends on several things. The first thing I think is style. This is very important because when you work in some particular style, then you usually have some particular workflow. For example, for orchestral music, you usually need the music notation software. But if you do not have orchestra, then very often you almost do not need this music notation software. Although you can use it for the songs, for rock, for jazz, but it is not that much needed that for the orchestral pieces. When you talk about the electronic music, there are almost special digital audio workstations for this type of music. For example, Ableton Live, Bitwig, Fruity Loops, and so on. We'll talk about this later in the later videos. So the first important thing is the style, and you can just go to the internet and find out how people write music in the style that you want. What software they use, what digital audio workstations, do they use music notation software, what FX samplers and synthesizers are best for this style. The next important thing is the quality that you need. So if you are creating demo, for example, then very often that will be enough to create a demo inside the music notation software. But this can be enough if you create demo, for example, for some other composers, for people who can understand how this will sound with real instruments or maybe with good virtual instruments. But if you create demo, for example, for vocalists or for some other musicians, maybe for them it will be more beneficial to create a demo using digital audio workstation with the sample libraries and so on. And of course the last but not the least thing for choosing the workflow is the budget. But you should always remember then that if you do not use digital audio workstation and libraries for your pieces, then probably most of listeners will not understand what you are doing. So maybe some like composers or conductors will be able to analyze the music, to make some reviews, comments on this, and maybe even just looking at the score. But usual listeners, it is difficult for them to understand what the sound of musical notation software means, because there is no dynamics. You cannot control dynamics very good, so it is very stepped dynamics. There are no good articulations, there are no round robins, and so you just get very little control of the sound. But of course, I have already said that you can control it, and this is not very easy. And also, as an example, I can tell that this piece of mine, this piece is created This piece was initially created using music notation software, and also I have a video tutorial how I import VST sampler Kontakt and the libraries, the Kontakt libraries into the Sibelius music notation software. And also I think I use some effects there, or maybe in a heavy cover track, I think. So you can input these strings into the YouTube search and you will find these tutorials and examples. Okay, this was an introductory video. I hope that it was informative for you. And in the next video I will talk about the components, the different types of applications and how they interact in more detail. Have a nice day.